Hello everybody, this is a new devlog about the game I'm making, solo using the Godot engine. It's a colony sim set in an open world with a fantasy setting. And today I'll talk about the progress I've made over the past few months. Sometimes everyone has those moods when they just don't want to code, can't focus on anything, and even thinking about anything feels unpleasant. But solo dev is nice because even then I can still find something useful and fun to do, like drawing sprites while listening to audiobooks. Good thing there are an endless number of sprites to draw. For example, the more variations of hairstyles, faces and bodies I add, the more unique the colonists start to feel. In my game, each settler's body is made up of different sprite layers. I decided to have 3 body types: skinny, average, and chubby. It's not a lot, but each type needs its own sprite in 3 directions and matching versions for all clothes, so 3 is enough for now. For skin color, I'm using a recoloring method so I can easily add more variety. And with more hairstyles and face options, the characters already started to feel more personal and different from each other. Another nice thing about solo development is total freedom in choosing what to work on. I don't follow a strict plan, I just pick tasks that match my current mood. So after drawing hairstyles for a while, I suddenly switched to something completely different: polishing the early combat system. I had already made a basic version of combat a long time ago, but some parts were still unfinished or unpolished. Combat is such a huge and complex system. On one hand, it's really fun to work on, but on the other, it's hard to know where to even start. To avoid feeling overwhelmed, I decided to move in tiny steps, starting with the basic abilities that players will get at the very beginning of the game. At the same time, I started working on ability timers and adjusting the balance. So, the game will have 5 weapon types: sword and shield, 2-handed axe, staff, bow, and bare hands. But at the very beginning, only the bow, a club, and a shield can be crafted. The club works basically like a sword, just with a few differences. To make working on animations easier, I drew sprites for the new weapons, the club and the shield. The bow was already ready a while ago. Then I started thinking about how the damage system should work. I decided that colonists will have separate health bars for arms, legs, head, and body. When they take damage, one of these bars goes down first. If any of them hits 0, the colonist gets an injury and can't use that body part anymore. I don't want to go the route of prosthetics or replacing limbs. That can make the character way too strong. I prefer to keep them soft and vulnerable, so players will need to figure out how to heal injuries, or how to survive with a crippled character. So, the colonist's life is shown as a green bar. It goes down as injuries add up. At some point, there are just too many wounds and the colonist dies. The red bars represent their health in different body parts. That's what you rely on during a fight. All changes to a colonist's condition are handled through buffs and debuffs. If you've played MMORPGs, this system will feel familiar. I think it's pretty clear and easy to understand. I just need to decide how to split them into tabs. Maybe separate ones for combat, health, mood, and so on. Because a single colonist might have a lot of buffs and debuffs at once. Colonists will also have permanent stats. Right now the list is very basic, just physical plus magic attack and defense. I'm still thinking about which other stats are actually needed. I don't want to clutter the system with random numbers no one looks at. But I do plan to add a few more: agility, intelligence, strength, and endurance. I think those 4 core stats can affect everything: combat, defense, movement speed, work speed, all of it. That should be enough for now, but maybe I'll add more later. All the variety in how colonists fight mostly comes down to what weapon they're using, and my game gear will be super important. For example, a club can deal stunning hits, while a sword has a high chance to cause bleeding. And if you find some legendary sword, it might come with extra special abilities. So exploring the world and researching new tech is the best way to deal with tough enemies. Right now, the enemies in the game aren't too dangerous. I'm mostly testing the combat system on peaceful creatures called leaf slip. Like in many other games, each creature in mine will have its own behavior. Some are peaceful and run away if attacked, while others are aggressive and strike first. Leaf slips are peaceful, but they will fight back if hurt, and they are incredibly strong. Taking down even a single one of these creatures is a real challenge for a starting colony, and facing several aggressive leaf slips will almost certainly mean the end of the game. With that in mind, I gave the colonists some basic ragged clothes and starter weapons, and tuned the stats just enough so they can barely win against one leaf slip. The balance feels good for now. While I was working on spells and the first set of debuffs, I kept getting distracted by different art tasks. For example, while doing the stun animation, I ended up teaching the colonists not just to close their eyes, now they can blink too. That small detail made them look a lot more alive. Also, once I had enough drafts for spells and buffs, I decided it was time to start drawing them properly. Sure, I could keep testing everything with placeholder icons, but as the number of buffs grew, I really wanted more clarity. At first, I hoped to cheat a little and save time by asking ChatGPT to draw the icons for me. But after messing around with prompts and still not getting what I wanted, I once again accepted the simple truth. If you want something done right, do it yourself. So I spent a couple of days in Photoshop. Drawing each icon one at a time as I need them would be too tiring. It's much better to do a bunch at once. Still, it can be hard to come up with a clear visual for certain effects. But once I have a solid idea in mind, the drawing process goes much faster. After figuring out the math behind how damage is applied, I wanted to bring the visuals closer to what they should look like in the final version. I'd been thinking for a while about how to visualize things like dirt stains, blood, or other effects, ideally without hurting FPS. At first, I tried the most straightforward approach, just making the ground shader more complex. This had no impact on performance, but the result looked too tidy and tile-like. That's because the stains couldn't be offset to the edge of a ground cell polygon. They had to stay centered. So I ended up going with a middle ground solution, creating additional polygons for the dirt. Fortunately, Godot provides tools to do this in a very performance-friendly way. There's a mechanism that allows certain, and importantly identical, things to be rendered in a single frame. Those familiar with Unity might recall the concept of a draw call. Godot has something similar. That said, there's a major downside to this approach. Anything rendered in the same frame can't visually interact with objects rendered in other frames. In simple terms, depth checking stops working. For blood and dirt on the ground, that's not an issue. They're always beneath everything else. But for roofs, this causes a problem. For example, trees might get rendered under a roof, even though logically they should be above it. I haven't yet figured out a good way to solve this visual issue with roofs. I'm afraid that without using this optimized rendering method, players who love covering their entire base with rooftops might run into FPS issues. So I'd rather have a few visual quirks than risk performance drops. Either way, I managed to make the stains look organic, not too locked to the grid, and quick to render. I also wanted to make colonists show visible, bloody wounds once they've taken enough damage. It adds a layer of emotional impact for the player. A badly hurt colonist limping across the village naturally draws attention. And the bloodstains on the ground actually come from real damage or a bleeding debuff. So after a big fight, you'll have to clean up half the base. True RimWorld spirit. And finally, I taught colonists how to die. Up until now they were immortal and soulless, but now they've got their very first basic need, to stay alive. The closed eyes mechanic came in handy here. Besides combat, I also tackled another long-standing issue that had been bugging me, Torchlight. I already had some code in place for static light sources, but I was worried about portable torches or fire-based spells. The lighting system in my game is so overcomplicated and written so long ago that I honestly don't even remember how it works anymore. So I had to integrate torches into that system without breaking everything in the process. Another visual task closely related to lighting is the fog of war, a must-have for an open world. Since this is a colony sim where the player can freely move the camera, we need to hide areas that haven't been explored yet. So the fog will cover everything that's not near the pawns or special watchtowers, which the player can place around their base for full visibility. After all, if someone's attacking, you'd at least want to see it coming. The first watchtower is already drawn. According to the lore, these towers rely on moths to scout the surroundings. I'm thinking of tying their crafting to animal husbandry, where certain creatures would assist with reconnaissance, kind of like Sauron's spies in The Lord of the Rings, bats and such, but in our case it could be moths, eagles, or others. I'm not yet sure whether the animals should physically go inside the towers or just be involved indirectly, like through their eggs. Most likely it's better if the towers are fully autonomous and don't need constant attention from colonists. The fog of war works similarly to the lighting system. Light only reveals a limited area around an object. But unlike lighting, I decided not to overcomplicate things. If the player is surrounded by walls, they'll still see what's happening beyond them. You know how in some games you can't see what's behind a wall or tree until you walk around it? I skipped that. Let's say fog of war reflects not just vision, but also hearing. So a pawn might hear something happening on the other side of a wall. The visible area around a pawn depends on two things. Their health, for example, a pawn with a head injury sees almost nothing, and lighting. That's why in darkness or indoor areas, a torch can help reveal danger before it's right in front of your lost colonists. I spent a while trying to make the fog not only functional but also nice looking. At first I imagined a light cosmic texture, stars, maybe some elegant patterns. I tried various samples from the internet to find the right look, but they all felt too out of place or visually overwhelming, so I ended up going with a simple dark texture, almost black, with faint little stars. It seems okay. What do you think?